My son-in-law carried a 65-inch television through my front door on a Tuesday morning, and I thought it was the nicest thing anyone had done for me in years. That says something, I know. I was 68 years old, retired after 31 years as a civil engineer, living alone in the same split-level house in Akron, where my wife Sandra and I had raised 2 kids. Sandra passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and brutal and unfair. After she was gone, the house got quiet in a way I hadn't expected. Not peaceful quiet. The other kind. So when my daughter called 3 weeks before Christmas and said she and her husband wanted to bring me a new television, a real one, she said, not that outdated box I'd had since 2009, I didn't think twice. I said, come on over, I'll make coffee. They showed up on a cold Tuesday. My daughter, my son-in-law, and their boy, my 13-year-old grandson. My son-in-law set the TV up on the media stand while my daughter wrapped her arm around my shoulder and said, Dad, you deserve something nice. I remember thinking she seemed tired, distracted. Her eyes kept drifting to her phone. My grandson sat on the couch the whole time, not saying much, watching his stepfather work the cables. That kid has always been quiet, thoughtful. He's more like Sandra than anyone else in the family. The kind of person who notices things other people walk right past. The television was beautiful, crystal clear. It had apps built in, streaming, news, weather. My son-in-law showed me how to connect it to my home Wi-Fi network, typed in my password himself because I had it written on a notepad by the router. Said he'd set everything up, so it was easy for me. You'll love it, Dad, my daughter said. She kissed my cheek. They left before noon. I use that TV every day. Sports, evening news, an old Western series I'd been meaning to watch for years. For about 3 weeks, I thought it was the best gift I'd ever received. Then, 23 days after they set it up, I got a text from my bank. It was a fraud alert. A transfer of $900 had been initiated from my checking account to an account I didn't recognize. The message said to call immediately if I hadn't authorized it. I called. The bank representative told me the transfer had been requested through my online banking portal. I told her I hadn't touched online banking. I'd never been comfortable with it. Sandra used to handle most of that. After she died, I'd set up automatic bill pay with the help of a woman at my local branch, and that was as far as I'd gone. The representative flagged it as suspicious, reversed the transfer, and suggested I change my password. I changed it. I felt rattled, but figured it was a phishing attempt, something that had come from outside. I didn't connect it to anything in my house. But then it happened again. 6 days later, this time $1,400. I drove to my bank branch the next morning. Sat down with the same woman who'd helped me set up the automatic payments, a patient woman in her 50s who had worked there for years. She pulled up my account history. Someone had accessed my online banking portal 17 times in the past 3 weeks, all from an unfamiliar device, all from inside my zip code. She leaned across the desk and said quietly, "Have you given anyone your login credentials?" I said no. I said absolutely not. She looked at me for a moment and then said, "Would you be comfortable having someone check your home network? Sometimes these things originate closer than people expect." I drove home and I sat in my living room for a long time. I looked at the television. It was on. I hadn't turned it on. My grandson called me that evening for no particular reason. He did that sometimes just to check in, which still surprises me even now because most teenagers don't think to do that. I told him what had happened with the bank. I didn't tell him I was scared. I didn't have to. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "Grandpa, can I come over this weekend?" I said, "Of course." He said, "Bring your Wi-Fi password and don't change anything in the house before I get there." He drove over Saturday morning on his bicycle, even though it was 34 degrees. He came inside, drank the hot chocolate I made, and then he opened his laptop and got to work. My grandson had been interested in computers since he was 8 years old, not in the way kids are interested in games, in the way some kids are interested in how things work under the surface. He'd been teaching himself network security from YouTube tutorials and library books. His school's IT coordinator had let him help troubleshoot the school's server issues twice. He wasn't a professional, but he knew what he was doing in a way that I absolutely did not. He ran a scan on my home network. He was quiet for about 20 minutes. Then he called me over to the couch, where he was sitting. He pointed to his screen. There were 2 devices connected to my network that I didn't recognize. Not my phone, not my laptop. Something else. 2 somethings. He said, "Grandpa, one of these is the TV." I didn't understand at first. I said, "Televisions connect to Wi-Fi. That's normal." He shook his head. He said, "Not like this. This one is running something it shouldn't be." He explained it the way he always explains things to me, slowly, without condescension, like he actually wants me to understand. The television had an application running in the background, something that had been installed before it was given to me or during setup. It was logging keystrokes from any device on the same Wi-Fi network. It had captured my banking username and password when I'd logged in to check a statement 2 weeks earlier. I sat down in the armchair across from him, and I didn't say anything for a while. Then I said, "Who set this up?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because I think a lot of people expect the story to move fast here, to the anger, to the confrontation. But the truth is, my first feeling wasn't anger. It was grief. Pure and simple. The same hollow feeling I'd had standing in the hospital hallway the night Sandra died, that sense of the floor tilting, the world rearranging itself into a shape you don't recognize. My daughter, my little girl, the one whose college graduation I had cried at, the one I had walked down the aisle, the one who had sat beside me in that hospital and held my hand. My grandson was still looking at his laptop. He said very quietly, "There's more, Grandpa." He'd found it while scanning the network logs. Someone using my Wi-Fi credentials had accessed my online banking portal repeatedly. But he'd also found something else. 2 months earlier, a document had been downloaded from my email account, a document I had sent to my financial planner the previous spring, a summary of my assets, my savings, my pension, the equity in the house. My house. I built up equity in this house for 34 years. It is the place where my children grew up, where my wife planted the garden along the back fence that still blooms every May. It is the only thing of real value I have left, and I had always intended to leave it to both my kids equally. I put it in my will. I thought everyone understood that. My grandson pulled up a record search and found something that made him go very still. A title transfer inquiry had been filed 2 weeks earlier with the Summit County Recorder's Office, my name, my address, and a power of attorney document attached, one I had never signed. I looked at that document on his screen for a long time. I recognized the signature. It wasn't mine, but it looked like mine. Same looping letters, same slight rightward slant. Someone had studied my signature long enough to reproduce it on a legal document. I called my bank from my grandson's cell phone, not mine, because we didn't know what else might be compromised. I told them to freeze all transactions pending an investigation. The woman on the phone did not hesitate. She said she'd flag the account immediately and connect me with their fraud department. Then my grandson said, "Grandpa, we need to report this to the police." I said, "I know." I said, "Give me a minute." I went into the kitchen and stood at the sink and looked out the window at Sandra's garden, bare and brown in December. I had spent 4 years in this house learning how to be alone, learning how to cook something other than sandwiches, learning how to sleep in a bed that felt too large, I had not spent those 4 years waiting to be robbed by my own child. I went back into the living room and I sat down across from my grandson and I said, "Okay, let's do this." We went to the Akron Police Department together. My grandson brought his laptop. He'd saved everything: the network logs, the screenshot of the unknown devices, the keylogger application details, the property records. The detective we spoke with, a straightforward woman in her 40s, looked through everything carefully. She asked me several questions. She asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes. That was one of the hardest words I've ever spoken. Not because I wasn't sure, because I was completely sure, and that certainty hurt in a way I hadn't anticipated. The investigation moved faster than I expected. The detective contacted the Summit County Recorder's office and confirmed the power of attorney filing. A forensic review of the document confirmed the signature was forged. The keylogger application on the television was traced to a purchase made from an account connected to my son-in-law's email address. He had bought it online 11 days before Christmas. My daughter's cell phone records placed her in my neighborhood on 3 separate occasions when the banking access occurred. During the hours I was typically out, my Tuesday hardware store trips, my Thursday morning walks. They had been careful, but not careful enough. 3 weeks after my grandson and I sat in that detective's office, 2 officers knocked on my daughter's front door at 7:30 in the morning. My son-in-law was taken into custody first. My daughter was arrested 20 minutes later. They were each charged with financial elder abuse, identity theft, forgery of a legal document, and unauthorized computer access. My grandson called me from outside their house. He'd been driving to school when he saw the patrol cars. His voice was steady, but I could hear what was underneath it. He said, "It's done, Grandpa." I said, "Come over after school." He did. We sat at my kitchen table, and I made us both grilled cheese sandwiches, which is what Sandra used to make whenever anyone in the house was having a hard day. We didn't talk very much. We didn't need to. I've thought a lot about why it happened. My daughter and son-in-law had debts I didn't know about. Real estate investments that had gone badly. A second mortgage on their house. They needed money, and they looked at me, at this house, at my savings account, and they made a calculation. They decided I was old enough to manage, trusting enough to fool, and isolated enough not to notice until it was too late. They were wrong about the last part, because they forgot about the boy on the bicycle. My daughter called me once from the county jail about a month after her arrest. She cried. She told me she was sorry. She told me she hadn't wanted it to go this far. I listened to everything she said. I didn't hang up on her. I'm not a man who hangs up on people. But I also didn't tell her what she wanted to hear. I told her that I loved her, because I do, and I think I always will, because that's not something that just turns off. But I also told her that love doesn't mean looking away from what someone has done. Sandra used to say that real love is honest, even when honesty is painful. She was right about almost everything. My son-in-law pled guilty to 3 of the 4 charges. My daughter's case went further. She was convicted on all counts. The judge, reviewing the evidence, including the forged power of attorney, described the crime as a systematic and deliberate exploitation of a vulnerable family member. She was sentenced to 4 years. The title transfer was reversed. The bank recovered the full amount that had been taken. The television is gone. My grandson unplugged it, and we put it out on the curb together, which felt more satisfying than I expected. I have a new television now. A simple one. I bought it myself at the electronics store on a Saturday afternoon, paid cash, carried it to my car without anyone's help. Set it up myself, which took longer than it probably should have, but I managed. My grandson comes over every other Sunday. We watch football, and I make chili. He started talking about studying cybersecurity in college, which I think is a very good idea. I told him so. I told him he was the reason I still have a home to sit in, and he looked embarrassed the way teenagers do when they've done something genuinely important and don't know how to accept the weight of it. He said, "You would have figured it out eventually, Grandpa." I said, "Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to do it alone." Sandra's garden is going to bloom again in May. I've been reading up on what she used to plant along the back fence, some kind of yellow coneflower, some lavender. I ordered seeds last week. I don't know exactly what I'm doing yet, but I'm going to try. That seems like enough for now. I keep coming back to the TV sitting on the curb. My grandson and I carried it out together on a grey December afternoon, and neither of us said much. It was just a television. 65 inches of glass and plastic, but standing there on the sidewalk watching it, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not even anger anymore. Just clarity. The kind that only comes after something is completely over. I've thought about what made all of this possible. Not just the crime, but the unraveling of it. And I keep arriving at the same answer. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was a 13-year-old boy who paid attention when no one asked him to, who showed up on a bicycle in 34-degree weather because something didn't sit right with him. He had built something in himself. Real knowledge, earned quietly over years of reading and teaching himself and asking questions. That kind of preparation doesn't happen overnight. It comes from a person who takes their own mind seriously. And when the moment came, he was ready for it, even though he had no idea the moment was coming. I think about that a lot now, how integrity, the real kind, not the performed kind, tends to move in a direction. My daughter made choices that compounded over time, each one a little further from the person I thought she was, until she was someone capable of forging my signature on a document intended to take my home. That didn't happen all at once. It happened in small steps, each one justified by the one before it. That's how it always works. The direction matters more than any single decision. And my grandson moved in the opposite direction. Each small thing he learned, each Saturday spent on a laptop teaching himself something most adults don't bother to understand, each time he picked up the phone just to check on his grandfather, all of it accumulated into something that saved me. I don't think he sees it that way. He'd say he just noticed something wrong and followed it. But that's exactly what character looks like from the inside. It doesn't feel heroic, it just feels like doing the next right thing. What I know now, at 68, is that none of us get through hard things on intelligence alone. After the bank calls, after the detective asks her questions, after the judge reads the sentence, you still have to go home. You still have to stand at the kitchen sink and look out at a garden your wife planted and decide what you're going to do with the rest of your life. That takes something different. It takes the willingness to keep going when the people you loved most have given you every reason to close the door and stop caring about what comes next. I ordered those flower seeds. I don't entirely know what I'm doing, but I'm going to be out there in May with my hands in the dirt, figuring it out. That's enough. It has to be.